Opening up the weekly Peacock and Williamson mailbag, we've got questions on some surprise, maybe later round rookie quarterbacks. We saw some last year that made good. Who's impressing this year? And what about quarterback injuries that are up? Is that something that's going to stay a theme going into the 2023 season? Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on Twitter. That's where most of the questions came from today. You can also always drop a question in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribed up as well on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Appreciate all of the everydayers out there. A lot of good questions in this one. Multiple different angles of quarterback questions. There's always a lot of quarterback questions going into a new season, Matt. And, some excitement about some of the younger players around the league, some non-first round guys, some non-rookie quarterbacks as well that have a chance to make a jump this year. And a really good question about the South divisions. How good are those South divisions? Could we even get a couple of playoff teams from one of those South divisions that most people think of as a couple of the worst divisions in the NFL right now? But I want to start with quarterback injuries. It's something we've touched on a little bit recently. And my guy, John Chapman, he's a 49ers content creator, dropped this question for us. And it is about the year of the quarterback carousel last year, as it is termed in the article that he linked to. Last year, he says, it seemed like most quarterback injuries that I can remember, 69 different quarterbacks starting last year is a record in a non-strike year. He says, do you think that trend continues in 2023, or was that just a weird blip to you, Matt, in 2022?
I think it's one of the biggest things that happened last year, frankly, in the whole league. And scoring was down again. You know, the COVID year in 2020, I think it was 2020, was super high scoring, dropped again in 2021, dropped again in 2022. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, several teams, including your Niners, the Dolphins, et cetera, had 4 different starters. You know, I mean, 4 is bonkers. Like, when everybody breaks camp here in a couple of weeks, you're not even going to have a 4th guy on your team. I mean, you're pulling somebody off the street in that situation. So there's some things we've talked about that I think contribute to it. First off is I do think quarterbacks put themselves in more danger now as runners than they used to, take more hits. I'll always go back to NFL defensive lines are better than NFL offensive lines. I mean, I think that's undoubtedly true, and deep down is a competitive problem that the league office has to deal with. But speaking of the league office, my hunch is they're very aware that there were 69 starting quarterbacks this past year and probably don't want it to happen again. So I mentioned that COVID year, holding was basically legal that COVID year. I'm wondering if they're going to protect quarterbacks a little more.
Well, it's wild that, well, and I know why it is. Well, I know partially why it is. And it's not just quarterbacks that are running more than ever right now, but the quarterbacks are being protected more than ever. How are injuries climbing at that position is what one of my questions would be with this. And that's sort of getting to if those injuries are going to stay. And we've touched on this before, Matt, on the show. And I think it's one of the, that's why I love this question, because it's one of the most intriguing things to me in the 2023 season and going forward is quarterback injuries, and more running quarterbacks equals more hit quarterbacks. We know hit players equal injured players. It's why the attrition is so high at running back. Now, if you're putting your quarterback in danger, traditionally, you know, if I was an NFL owner, I would say, man, I want a superstar quarterback, and I want to protect that superstar quarterback with everything we possibly can. But you can't do that when they're out of the pocket, you know, because it's out of the offensive line's hands, and it's up to the quarterback to slide, get down, get out of bounds, protect themselves. And then you have the normal injuries on top of it, where Tua wasn't hurt because he was running the football, you know. And many other quarterbacks were also hurt. It's not like just running quarterbacks were getting injured, but there's so many teams that are trying to find athletic quarterbacks and change the numbers for themselves in the running game on offense. And there's a ton of benefits to that. But at the same time, if those superstar quarterbacks start making a lot of money and start getting hurt and you're going to the backups too often, that's not good for those teams or the entire league. And so I wonder if some teams and some GMs will say, no, we still are trying to find the superstar pocket quarterback, because even if you find the superstar athletic quarterback, if he's out there getting hit, he's going to get hurt. And now you're back to your backup anyway.
Yeah, a couple things I want to react to there is, you mentioned, I forget how you phrased it. If I was an owner, I want a quarterback and then I'm going to protect them.
Yes.
Well, the best example I can come up with that is what the Chiefs did. I mean, after that Super Bowl against Tampa, where Mahomes had no blocking and he's throwing passes, laid out in the air, getting destroyed, I know for a fact that the Chiefs decision makers came to the conclusion, if we protect Pat, we're going to be one of the best teams in the league. And that might mean letting Tyreek go, but they invested in Creed Humphrey. They found a guard later. They went out and got Joe Tooney for big money. Like their O-line is a heavy investment, and it's proving to be right. I mean, we still have Travis, and we got a bunch of receivers people don't even know, and a bunch of running backs nobody cares about. But we have an O-line, one pass catcher, and Pat. And so he's so good. We're good enough to compete with any team and maybe be better than any team only with that stuff, and then, obviously the Chris Jones and some other good people too.
Yeah. And it's nice to have that quarterback that you need to protect too. So you got to find that first. And then the other part of it for me is like, okay, well, we know we're going to have more running quarterbacks. Well, if there's more running quarterbacks, there's more running quarterbacks coming from the college level as well. And this sort of ties into the next question, Matt, about so to answer John's questions, first of all, I don't.
Yeah, I want to get back to this real quick.
There's going to be fewer injuries. It might not be a record-setting year. Like, are we going to start seeing 70-plus injuries, or 70-plus starting quarterbacks over the course of a season? Not likely. It does allow some, Brock Purdy's to happen. Brock Purdy would just be a number 3 quarterback.
Sure.
Nobody would know anything about. Maybe the coaching staff likes him a little bit, but you're like, hey, he's a long-term backup. He's going to make the team a backup. Trey Lance this year, that would be the situation if Trey never got hurt. So it opens up some opportunities. It's not always bad, but most of the time, if your starting quarterback goes down, that's a bad thing for your football team, and it ends poorly. And so I wonder what the league will do to try to counter that. And I think getting more backup quarterbacks as well will also help if you're attacking that position and you're not as worried about superstar one. You're worried about getting a good one, but you also want to have a good 2. Is that the way things are going to go? Moneyball approach to quarterback is another possibility.
So last thing I want to touch on that too is, I think when we see roster cuts this year, there will be fewer teams that only keep 2. I mean, that's been a strong trend. I think a lot of teams will keep 3 as well as the practice squad guy.
New emergency quarterback rule as well that doesn't count against your 46 that dress, so that helps.
And just to answer the flat out question, I think 69 is a ridiculously high number and probably won't be matched in the coming years. I think that's a bit of an anomaly. I mean, it's just a huge number. But in addition to injuries, guys are going to get benched too. Is Mayfield going to get benched for Trask or vice versa, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that stuff's never going to go away, where you want to play the backup because you might think he's better or he's younger,
And some of what happened with the number of starting quarterbacks isn't just injuries either. That's kind of what we're focusing on. But there was you thought Matt Ryan would start every game for you, right?
Right.
Even if you roll and the Colts have decided that Anthony Richardson is going to be their starting quarterback this year, which is clearly the right move and something they had to do. But even if he gets hurt, they're not going to start more quarterbacks than they did last year, because they already started 3 different quarterbacks last year, right? The Colts did. And so not having a good quarterback or thinking your quarterback plan was good, it turns out not to be, is another factor there. And all 32 teams think they're pretty good or like the path they have at quarterback. Maybe not all 32, but close to it. And that changes pretty quick. You get into week 3, and you're like, I don't like who I have a quarterback anymore.
No, like Matt Ryan's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Last thing too is, let's not forget they're playing an extra game too. I mean, you have 17 opportunities, 18 weeks really over the course of the year to add to this number where it used to be 17. And along those lines, I'm sure 5, 6, 7 of those new starters came in week 18 when you're going to bench Josh Allen for the playoffs or Burrow or something like that, and so that doesn't exactly count, but that's going to happen every year too.
Yes. Next question, Matt, is about some of the maybe later round, not superstar, high drafted first round quarterbacks that have impressed so far in preseason and camp. And hey, this goes hand in hand with the last question because all it takes is one injury, and that gives the guy
see these guys.
Right. So we might have to see some of these guys this year who we're looking at in 2023. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Nutrafol. Men tired of weakening or thinning hair out there? You want to reach your full hair potential. Leading hair growth supplement Nutrafol helps improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements, by the way, use physician-formulated, natural, science-backed ingredients. Drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising, say, your sexual health or other side effects that other drugs can. This is drug-free, patented technology that allows you to have thicker hair for men out there that are looking for a healthier hair and a whole body supplement. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair for a limited time. Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men. That's spelled Nutrafol, Nutrafol.com/men and enter promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Again, that's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Okay. Nate Seahawks asks, late round quarterbacks, rookies especially. I'd love to see what you guys thought of guys like McKee, Bennett, Cunningham, etc., that were late rounders or even undrafted in the Cunningham's case over the course of camp and preseason so far.
So I just pulled up drafthistory.com and clicked on the quarterback position because I want to talk about the last 2 years just a little. Last year was weird, the Pickett Purdy year. Yeah, I mean, we don't need to talk about them anymore. They get more than enough airtime on this podcast. But there was only 9 quarterbacks drafted last year, 2022. None in the 6th round, and 3 of them are 7th rounders, including Purdy. So there isn't a lot to pick from there. But I do want to highlight one guy, and that's Malik Willis, because he looked way better than Levis this past week. And all reports out of camp are he's starting to get it. You know, like he had no clue when he came out of Liberty, which is why he was a 3rd round pick. And he's running with the 2s. So I just wanted to throw him out there as a mid-early round guy from last year that has been forgotten after the Levis pick that might not be quite dead yet. You know,
that's a sneaky one too in Tennessee because Ryan Tannehill's very likely done after this year there. And
one of those young guys is going to play at some point, I'm sure.
Right. And those are both physically super talented guys. They're first round physical talents, even though neither one went in the 1st round. And so that's a nice little quarterback battle. And they're going to play a lot in the preseason. And we did have a commenter on YouTube that was upset that we didn't spend enough time on those 2 quarterbacks when we were breaking down our games. We kind of, went through the entire league pretty quick in just one episode and talked about some of the quarterbacks. I wasn't super impressed with either one. Which is why, but I'm going to pay a little closer attention. It's a fun training camp battle that could have bigger implications than we're kind of thinking about right now. And they're not the first quarterbacks that come to mind. So Malik Willis and who's the other guy there? 2nd rounder they drafted this year. Levis. Yeah, Will Levis. Sorry. So that's a really fun one. I saw a guy. Good. I was going to say that there's 2 names that jump off the page to me and that come to mind immediately with this question. And the first one we've already seen twice because he played in the Hall of Fame game, and that's DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. 5th round. I mean, he's a steal already. I'm kind of upset that he ended up in Cleveland because there's such an obvious block for him to be able to play. But when in the first segment, we talked about injuries and quarterbacks. And if you've got an athletic running quarterback, name the team that has that style of player. They should have drafted DTR because he is the perfect backup. He comes in, played a lot of football at UCLA. He is ready to go. They're
playing tonight, dude. That's the only game tonight. They're playing tonight.
It's coming fast. I forget Thursday. Football's coming back. It come as soon as the season starts. It's fast and furious, man. I do love the Thursday football. It's not great for the product and for the players to play on short weeks, but I like that you get that Thursday game. It's
for preseason. It's great.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been super impressed with him. I mean, he just looks like he's ready to go, and he could be that guy. And Deshaun Watson contractually is locked in. Even if he plays bad, I mean, he would have to be hurt for DTR to get a shot. So I think after he's a preseason superstar. Might not hear from him during the regular season for a while, which is unfortunate because I loved what I've seen from him and a great pick there by the Browns. But another one I saw a lot of this past week was Raiders quarterback Aiden O'Connell. I didn't think 100%. Much of the pick when they made it, but he was slinging the ball around. Again, another player that looked like he was more ready to go than you would expect from a rookie, and he surprised me, and he intrigued me quite a bit.
Yeah, so we have Browns at Philly tonight, and I agree with everything you said about DTR. And just to add to it, you need a super cheap backup with Watson's contract, and this guy might be perfect for that. A 5th-round contract for the next 4 years, that's gold. And mentioning the Eagles, I didn't watch Tanner McKee, and I will tonight. So I know this tweeter, mentioned McKee, so I can't really comment on him, but I am excited to watch him tonight.
Marquee quarterback matchup tonight, Matt.
I guess you're right. How about that? I was going to mention O'Connell for sure. Maybe he was even the best of any rookie quarterback this past week. I think Stetson Bennett is worth bringing up. But the name I need to really bring up is Sean Clifford with the Packers. Like, I'm almost certain a day or two after the draft on this podcast, I said, I think this is the worst pick in the whole draft. I watch this guy at Penn State all the time. I think he's horrible. And he's been pretty good for the Packers.
Dude, Packer fans are going crazy. And this happens every time. Like, every team, 32 teams around the league, their fan bases are super jazzed about one player preseason that's shown out and gets a lot of press and a lot of pub, and then they disappear. And so we'll see what it ends up looking like for some of those players. And they end up getting cut, and even the rest of the league doesn't like him either. And you're like, what happened to this one guy we thought was the secret superstar and never ended up doing anything for my team? So you got to take a little bit with the grain of salt because it's preseason and the games don't matter. But it is always exciting to see those players. And look, didn't think much of Brock Purdy last year. And look what the 49ers ended up with. They ended up with the best quarterback in the draft last year, even though he was the last one.
I was about to say, though, everyone's going to ask us, who's this year's Brock Purdy?
That's kind of what this question was. Yeah, it's like don't close the door on these guys. You got to pay attention to some of these players. And so, like what I've seen,
more chances to get on the field than most. 69 starting quarterbacks. 5 of the guys we talked about are going to be of those 69. You know what I mean? And the answer is none of them are Purdy, but these are the best chances to be.
Yeah, none of them could possibly be that good. But I mean, this is it could be a crazy quarterback draft. We've already seen some really good play from the non-first rounders, and 3 of the first 4 picks for quarterbacks. And one of them I just called a future superstar on yesterday's podcast, and Anthony Richardson. So, this could be one of those years that we look back and
certainly wouldn't blow me away if the 2 top quarterbacks picked is not the best player at the position in the draft when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it never happens.
Right. I mean,
it really always happens the other way. In fact, usually there's that curse of the second guy too. The CJ Stroud is like the cursed one. He's the one that's gonna have to break that curse and not be the next, Darnold and Wentz and RG3 and down the list. Even if they shined and had some short spurts, the careers, Ryan Leaf obviously is the big one there. So.
And there's also the Trubisky's and Bakers that went ahead of Allen and Watson and Mahomes. And, right.
Yeah, a lot of times it wasn't the first guy. It was the second, third guy that went later was afterthought. The teams passed on, too. Multiple teams that could have drafted a quarterback that passed it on. One of those guys that turns out to be the superstar. Is it a 4th rounder? Is it a 5th rounder? Is it the number 4 pick in the draft? I don't know. But quarterback stuff is always fun to talk about here. We did have another quarterback question here. If you want to address it quickly, Jason says, which non-rookie quarterback with a new team has the best chance to exceed expectations this season?
Carr?
I like that one. Yeah. Carr.
Who else would have the pick from? Yeah, I say Rodgers is kind of because exceeding expectations is the key with Rodgers. Expectations are way up here.
They're high. That's true.
If they lose a game, then he didn't exceed expectations.
How about post hype exceeding expectations, Russell Wilson?
Maybe. I have much faith in Peyton to make him more respectable. And I'd like to also mention the last 2 or 3 games after the coaching change during the season were much better for Wilson. They weren't his old self, but he wasn't an embarrassment. So I know Peyton said some bad things about his predecessor, but he might not have been wrong either.
I'm having a tough time even coming up with options for this one.
I know. Rodgers is at low-hanging fruit. Carr could lead us to this South conversation.
True.
I mean, there's a lot of rookies that don't count, the Bryce Youngs and CJ Strouds and those types, Richardson.
Speaking of Derek Carr and the Saints and the NFC South, it's a good question. Can either South division, AFC South or any AFC or NFC South divisions have multiple playoff teams, or is it you win the division or you are not in the playoffs for those 2 divisions? And more from the Peacock and Williamson mailbag next. Thank you once again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Hit the thumbs up, the notification bell, and all that so you know when a new show goes live. We appreciate all of you. Okay, what do you think about the Souths? After we've seen some camp and we've seen more fully formed teams here, we've seen some late additions in the summertime to the North and the AFC and NFC South divisions. Is it possible that we get multiple playoff teams from either one of these?
I also think the NFC North is pretty substandard, but let's start with the AFC South. I think the answer to this question is no to the AFC South. And if the answer ends up being yes, Vrabel won Coach of the Year. He somehow got 10 wins out of the Titan team, and Derrick Henry had 2,000 yards. You know what I mean?
So you're assuming it would only be Titans or Jaguars that are the 2?
I am assuming that, yeah. I mean, if it's 2, Jags win the division, Titans the 7th seed by a miracle of Vrabel, which I guess is possible, but I would not put a cent on that.
So just complete disrespect of the Colts and the Texans and their rookie quarterbacks, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of getting over even the mediocre AFC teams. I mean, they got to get past the Patriots, Steelers, Browns, Broncos. You know what I mean? And their
question on the AFC side is which one of the teams don't get in that case.
Yeah, right.
Somebody, it might have to be catastrophic, right? Is there a big injury to, and we've already kind of seen it, Burrow, a little scare there. He should be back.
Yeah, right.
But Burrow, Josh Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, is there some big injury that takes one of those teams out of it? Because there's not a lot of wiggle room for a non-East or, East. Yeah,
we didn't mention the Jets.
Every division has multiple
Dolphins,
teams that you would put over
Chargers.
just about every. Yeah, the Steelers and
right. Patriots aren't going to be terrible.
Browns and the Ravens and so
Right.
it's so difficult in that. So that's why, to me, the NFC North is much more likely, even though I think it's even a worse division than the AFC South.
Perhaps Jacksonville's definitely the best South team.
Yes, and I would say I would pick the Titans to be at least right up there with the Saints
for a second. Yeah,
and and we talked about Carr being a guy that really makes good on a new team this year.
Mm-hmm.
Carr and the Saints, that could go great, but I could see that going really poorly as well.
So NFC South, I want to talk about for a few minutes though, because I've been thinking, I'm sure everybody does. One day we're going to have a prediction show, and I feel pretty strong, 90% chance I'm going to predict 2 NFC South playoff teams, the Saints and the Falcons. I don't know who's going to win the division. I'm going to predict it. I like their chances better than the Bears or Vikings or Commanders or Giants or, I think 2 get in. And hang with me here for a second. This is going to take a minute, but stop me when you get to a really good quarterback. And this is the Falcons schedule and the Saints schedule. Panthers, Packers, Lions. Goff's okay, but he's not top 10 guy. Jaguars, there's one. Okay, I got one so far. Houston, Washington, Tampa, Tennessee, Minnesota, Arizona, New Orleans. Then there's Aaron Rodgers. Bucks, Panthers, Colts, Bears, Saints. They face 2 top 10 quarterbacks, and it's not even Mahomes or Allen. I mean, it's Rodgers and it's Lawrence. And the Saints might even have it easier. Tennessee, Carolina, Green Bay, Tampa, New England, Houston. They also have the Jags. So that's the first one. Colts, Bears, Vikings, Atlanta, Lions, Panthers, Giants, Rams, Bucks, Atlanta. They play one good quarterback. and both those teams play a collective of 3, and Lawrence is on there twice.
When you were reading those off, I'm counting on my fingers here, and I've got 8 fingers up.
Okay.
And that's how many good quarterbacks they could potentially face. There's a lot of I have no idea about the quarterbacks.
Right.
We're talking about what's Ritter, what's Richardson going to look like if you get him late in the year versus if you get him earlier in the year. Bryce Young, same story. There's Jordan Love. Jordan Love great out of the gate. He could be terrible. No idea there. Justin Fields. You didn't count him as a great quarterback. But
I'm talking about a top 10 right now.
Right.
But they could get there. Yeah.
He could enter that for sure. Justin Fields could do that from week 1. He could never get there, but he'll be trouble running at least, So
right.
That's it's. And are you good enough anyway? Right. So let's say Falcons, Bears, and okay, Ritter, Fields, the rest of those teams, they both have some strengths and weaknesses. That's you might look at that and say that's pretty easy schedule, but it's are they still better than that even?
Right. And that doesn't mean they have a quarterback advantage in that game either.
Right. And I would put the Bears in the same category as the Falcons, as you could probably do the same thing with the Bears. Is their schedule that much more difficult than the Falcons?
I forget what out of division divisions they play, but it definitely is. I mean, any strength of schedule metric I've seen, the Saints and Falcons are clearly the easiest of anyone. And then there's a distant third, and it's probably the Panthers or Bucks.
And then you look at the rest of it, and the Bears are a great example. And you mentioned Cousins, and you didn't count him as one of those quarterbacks.
No, I didn't.
He's a good quarterback. He's not top 10, but 12 maybe.
Yeah.
And there's just such an opportunity for that second tier of football team in the NFC as a whole to make the playoffs versus the AFC. And so that's
kind of like the Giants did last year.
It's just a smarter bet.
Yeah.
Because of the conference to bet on the NFC South getting 2 rather than the AFC South.
I mean, real quick, I think both of us or most of us would put the Browns, Steelers, Patriots, maybe even Denver in the playoffs if they were in the NFC. I think the Steelers are better than just about every team in the NFC except for 3 or 4. And New England's got a lot of problems, but I'll bet on Belichick to get 9 wins against that schedule, or you know what I mean?
Right. Like that, the Patriots with their problems would have been a playoff team in the NFC South last year.
Right. So even the 10th best team or lower, frankly, the 13th best team in the NFC or AFC, I would probably project as a playoff team in the NFC, which is nuts. Yep.
It's fair.
Yeah.
A lot of it's the quarterbacks. And so we'll see if anybody jumps into that echelon. But there's not that many possible quarterbacks to really change the tide even in the NFC. It's Love, it's Fields, it's Bryce Young.
Maybe Ritter. You got to reach a little bit. Yeah.
And the AFC has not ones that are already good. They got a new one in Aaron Rodgers, and then they've still got a couple of young players that could hit that level as well.
And oh, by the way, Wilson, Watson, Rodgers, they've been pretty good in their career. Might be a lot better than they were last year.
And they weren't good in the AFC last year.
They weren't good in the AFC last year.
So that's 3 more.
They have a track record, right? Yeah. They're Hall of Fame type guys almost. Rodgers definitely is.
You want to be in the NFC. That's where you want to be right now.
Yes.
That's the lesson here. Real quick, last one.
Last note, I just want to throw one thing out. Like, so Cardinals fans, let's say you end up with Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison's kid in this draft. You might be the fourth best team in the NFC when we have this podcast next August. You know what I mean?
And then you trade, and guess what? You trade Kyler Murray to the AFC.
Yeah, exactly. Trade him to the Patriots or something for another pick. You know, right? Like teams like, I mean, you could, the teams that look really down and out in the NFC could rebound quickly with May or Williams or somebody like that.
This one from our good friend Joey Bag of Donuts, a frequent listener and tweeter and commenter of the show, says, "Are joint practices more trouble than they're worth? Seems like they spend more time fighting than practicing."
I think they spend a lot of time fighting, and I think you need like hockey refs to break it up. You should like bring in WWE guys to break it up or something. The beauty of joint practices, just so people know, are coaches want situations. You know, like I want my backup quarterback to do 2-minute drill. Well, in the game, there may not even be a 2-minute opportunity. You know, so in practice, you're going to say, we're doing 3rd and long. We're doing red zone. My offense versus your defense. Great. We didn't get enough red zone work in games. You know, we didn't get enough hurry up, 2-minute stuff. That's the beauty of practice is instead of doing it against yourself, which gets old, trust me, you get to do it against somebody you don't know so well, and you can script the periods during practice, which is huge.
And clearly coaches like the joint practices. You get a couple of full days of practice and they can control things a lot better than they like the preseason game. So that, it's usually the most vanilla one. If you have your first preseason game after the joint practices, the coaches don't even care about the game anymore. They're like, yeah, go whatever. Here's some plays. Go play a football game. We're worried about practice and getting that work in, and their first teamers are practicing and they're not playing in the game and those types of things. As far as the fights go, nothing big really happens usually, and it's the first time you're facing somebody else. So I think it's just the natural, better to get that out of the way than have it happen in a preseason game too.
Boys being boys type of thing,
Yeah, and they do have refs.
They're going to happen.
Yeah.
So what, they fight.
And nothing ever happens anyway. They just yell and push each other and hit each other.
Punch each other in the fight. Punch each other in the face basket. Yeah, right.
You just got to show that you're tough. You're like, we're not going to put up with that. You try to knock the ball out of my hands off the whistle, I'm going to push you and fight you. It's all right. Thanks all for
good stuff. Yeah.
Thank you for all of the questions out there. Apologies to the questions we did not get to. We always appreciate you on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Any moment during the week, you think of a question, hit us there. Of course, in the YouTube comment. And Matt and I.
And folks, I'm going home. This is my last dorm podcast, by the way. Oh,
congratulations. Another successful training camp for Matt Williamson in Latrobe, PA. Get yourself out of that little tiny dorm room you got there. So,
right.
Congratulations. Matt and I back tomorrow, taking a look at what we are looking for in a preseason week number 2. Talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.